In AD 1241, Europe confronted one of history's most merciless paradoxes. A civilization that believed itself universal discovered, in a matter of days, that it was not truly united, not strategically coherent, and not prepared for an enemy whose methods belonged to a different age. What arrived from the East was not merely an invasion. It was an examination. It was a systems test, and Europe failed it. Latin Christendom often imagined itself as a moral commonwealth, a vast civilizational order bound by faith, hierarchy, and inherited legitimacy. But beneath that vision stood a harsher political reality. Kings distrusted dukes. Dukes contested bishops. Bishops maneuvered with princes. The papacy and the Holy Roman Empire remained trapped in rivalry so consuming that the defense of the frontier could become secondary to the defense of precedence. Feudal obligation produced armies, yes, but armies assembled slowly, unevenly, and under commanders whose authority was often negotiated rather than absolute. Europe had language for unity. It had ritual for unity. But in the realm that matters most during invasion, coordinated power, it possessed far less than it believed. That illusion might have survived much longer had the Eastern Shield held. But the Eastern Shield did not hold. Between AD 1237 and AD 1240, the Rus principalities were shattered by Mongol campaigns of astonishing force and precision. Cities fell, dynasties buckled, and what had once functioned as a difficult buffer between the steppe and Central Europe ceased to serve that role. This was not a frontier disturbance. It was the destruction of the defensive depth upon which many in the Latin West had unconsciously depended. The road west was no longer hypothetical. It had been opened by catastrophe. From that moment, Hungary became the hinge upon which the fate of Central Europe turned. King Bela IV understood that his realm required strengthening. He sought greater royal authority in a kingdom where magnates guarded privilege jealously and cohesion could never be assumed. Into this already unstable effort came the Cumans, steppe refugees fleeing Mongol expansion. To absorb them was strategically rational. They brought manpower, cavalry traditions, and the possibility of strengthening Hungary's frontier posture. But the decision was politically explosive because it imported distrust into an already divided realm. Hungarian elites feared the newcomers, resented the king's policies, and doubted whether a threatened kingdom should be restructured in the midst of crisis. Bela attempted statecraft under pressure, but pressure reveals every fracture that peace allows a society to ignore. To the north, Poland offered a different version of the same weakness. It was not a consolidated kingdom capable of swift concentration of force. It was a fractured political landscape of regional rulers, local ambitions, and valor unaccompanied by strategic unity. Courage there was, nobility there was, martial tradition there was, but against an enemy who could orchestrate vast operations across immense distances, fragmentation was not a regrettable complication. It was a sentence waiting to be delivered. The Mongols did not need every enemy to be weak. They only needed every enemy to be separate. This is where the scale of the historical misunderstanding becomes clear. By AD 1241, the Mongol Empire was already the largest contiguous empire in history. But its true strength did not lie simply in size, terror, or horse archery, though all three mattered. Its true advantage was that it represented an administrative revolution in war. It gathered intelligence before striking. It used relay communications to maintain operational coherence over staggering distances. It standardized command structures. It cultivated leaders according to competence and proven effectiveness rather than ancient pedigree alone. It fused mobility with discipline, deception with planning, reconnaissance with ruthless execution. In many settled societies, military prestige still clung to noble lineage and visible grandeur. The Mongols built a system in which information itself had become a weapon. Europe, by contrast, still centered much of its martial imagination on the prestige of armored aristocratic shock action. This was not irrational in every context. Heavy cavalry had dominated many battlefields and could shatter less organized opposition. But the Mongols were not merely another opponent waiting dutifully in front of a charge. They had created a war machine around timing, intelligence, engineering, maneuver, and multi-theater coordination. Their campaigns were not a succession of brave encounters. They were designed as integrated operational problems, solved through movement, communication, and control. That is why the invasion mattered so profoundly. It exposed one of history's cruelest truths. Societies often discover their deepest weaknesses only when tested by an enemy operating from the future. At the center of the Western campaign stood two figures whose partnership explains much of what followed. Batu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, provided dynastic legitimacy and political authority. Subutai, one of the greatest strategists in military history, provided the operational genius that transformed imperial ambition into battlefield reality. This pairing mattered because conquest at such scale required more than ferocity. It required political sanction, strategic coherence, and a command culture able to convert distant intention into synchronized action. Batu embodied the claim of empire. Subutai embodied its method. Nor was the campaign an improvisation born of sudden opportunity. The Mongols had already tested the Western world at the Battle of the Kalka River in AD 1223, where they defeated a coalition of Rus princes and Cuman forces. That clash was not yet a full invasion of Europe, but it was a warning and a reconnaissance in force. Then came consolidation across the Volga, the steppe, and the lands of the Rus. The empire did not merely charge westward blindly. It prepared, assessed, punished, reorganized, and returned when conditions favored a larger strike. This is one of the most recurring strategic asymmetries in history. Settled powers often treat a distant encounter as an episode, while expansionist powers treat it as data. The objectives of the AD 1241 campaign were likely layered rather than singular. The Mongols sought to destroy hostile powers on the empire's western approaches. They aimed to punish those sheltering enemies such as the Cumans. They intended to secure the frontier through annihilation of resistance and demonstration of irresistible force. And beyond these immediate goals lay a more unsettling question. How far into Central Europe might deeper conquest be viable? Hungary was not merely a target. It was a strategic gateway. Poland was not merely prey. It was a corridor through which interference might come. Austria and beyond stood not as fixed objectives in every narrow sense, but as possibilities to be measured once the nearer structures of resistance had been smashed. The brilliance of Mongol operational design lay in its ability to think continentally while acting locally. Multiple columns advanced across vast spaces, each capable of scouting, raiding, devastating, and fixing enemy attention. But these columns were not scattered fragments. They were components in a synchronized campaign. The northern thrust into Poland has sometimes been misunderstood as a secondary drama detached from the main invasion. In reality, it was strategically indispensable. Its purpose was to paralyze, distract, and prevent reinforcement of Hungary. The northern armies were not chasing glory on the margins. They were sealing the theater. This reveals the fundamental contrast in command systems. Mongol armies could divide without losing coherence, communicate without requiring physical proximity, and reunite at decisive moments with terrifying efficiency. European forces, by contrast, were constrained by local obligations, slower musters, uncertain loyalties, and commanders who often lacked a shared operational design, even when facing a shared mortal threat. A fragmented political order does not merely reduce the number of troops available. Cripples timing. It impairs concentration. It turns bravery into local expenditure rather than strategic effect. King Bela IV faced this dilemma acutely. He required unity because Hungary stood in the path of the main storm. But his efforts at centralization had alienated significant elements of the nobility and the integration of the Cuman's worst intentions. The murder of the Cuman leader Khotan by Hungarian nobles during the crisis was not an incidental outrage. It was a revelation of political disintegration. The king needed mounted allies and frontier expertise, but the kingdom's internal distrust helped destroy precisely the assets it needed. The Cumans, instead of serving as a stabilizing military resource, became entangled in panic, accusation, and collapse. In war, internal politics is not background noise. It is often the battlefield beneath the battlefield. In Poland, the challenge was different but equally fatal. Regional rulers and local coalitions could gather resistance, but inherited fragmentation prevented concentration of power on the scale required. This is why heroic defense so often failed against steppe empires when unsupported by coherent political institutions. The issue was not that European elites lacked courage. The issue was that courage cannot substitute for architecture. A civilization without rapid coordination is a civilization that must fight each emergency as though it were isolated, even when every emergency is connected. Above these local weaknesses towered the failure of continental response. The papacy and the Holy Roman Empire remained consumed by their own contest over authority. In calmer times, this rivalry could be framed as a constitutional struggle over the ordering of Christian society. But in AD 1241, it had a more brutal implication. Europe lacked an accepted central mechanism capable of directing unified action at speed. There existed no continental command structure, no reliable machinery for strategic integration, no political habit of subordinating status disputes to external danger. Therefore, rumor, improvisation, and localism filled the void. Logistics deepened the imbalance. The Mongols moved with remounts, enabling extraordinary operational speed. They drew sustenance through herds, forage, and systems adapted to movement rather than static magazines alone. Their scouts ranged ahead. Their intelligence came from reconnaissance, subject peoples, and accumulated campaign knowledge. Their engineers could reduce fortified places and enable river operations. Europe still often thought in terms of armies assembling for one great showdown, one climactic clash from which order would be restored. The Mongols were conducting mobile, continent-scale problem-solving. They did not seek battle merely as honor. They sought battle as one instrument among many in a coordinated design. Underlying all this was a familiar human error. European elites often mistook unfamiliarity for inferiority. Because Mongol methods did not resemble the prestigious forms of Latin aristocratic warfare, many underestimated what they represented. This is one of history's most repeated strategic blunders, to assume that an alien system, because it appears uncivilized by local standards, cannot surpass the local system in effectiveness. The enemy was judged by appearance and category. But war does not reward categories. It rewards results. Then came the decisive week. On April 9, 1241, at Legnica in Silesia, the Mongols defeated the forces of Henry II the Pious. On April 11, 1241, at Mohi in Hungary, they crushed King Bela Ivy's army. Europe did not suffer a single battlefield misfortune. It suffered a synchronized strategic unraveling. Legnica was not the main blow, but that is precisely what made it so effective. The northern Mongol force, associated with commanders such as Baidar, Khadan, and Orda, executed its role with extraordinary precision. It drew in regional levies and crusading contingents, manipulated the tempo of contact, employed deception, and fractured cohesion among the defenders. Henry II the Pious, a ruler of real seriousness and courage, became the focal point of resistance. But resistance without a theater-wide command design remained vulnerable to a more disciplined adversary. The Mongols lured, disordered, and destroyed. Henry was killed. The result went beyond tactical victory. It sealed off meaningful northern aid for Hungary at the very moment Hungary most needed it. The significance of Legnica has often been misunderstood because it can appear, at first glance, as a dramatic but localized battle at the edge of the wider catastrophe. Yet strategically it functioned as a lock on the northern door. It absorbed and eliminated potential reinforcements. It intensified panic across Central Europe. It proved that the threat was not singular, not concentrated in one obvious line of advance, but distributed and coordinated. Therefore, every ruler confronted not only danger, but uncertainty. Was the main army here? Was another column approaching elsewhere? Could allies arrive before annihilation? In such conditions, fear acquires strategic force because institutions built for slower warfare cannot process events quickly enough. At Mohi, the main army under Batu and Subutai displayed the full grammar of Mongol war. Reconnaissance preceded contact. Diversion obscured intention. Engineers enabled crossing operations over the Sejo River. Pressure was applied where the defenders expected it, but decisive action emerged where they were least prepared to absorb it. Bela's army, including elite cavalry and numerous noble contingents, had mass and prestige. But mass without flexibility can become a trap. Once compressed, once harassed by missiles, once threatened by maneuver and envelopment, an army built around frontal resolution can begin to suffocate inside its own assumptions. Subutai's design exploited precisely that vulnerability. The Mongols did not simply throw themselves against the Hungarian position in reckless fury. They fixed, probed, crossed, and widened the problem until the defenders were trapped within a deteriorating operational picture. Confusion intensified, space narrowed, command degraded, Then pressure became collapse. What occurred at Mohi was not merely a defeat in the conventional sense. It was the dismemberment of Hungary's field army as a coherent instrument of resistance. European chroniclers naturally emphasized the horror, speed, and ferocity of the Mongol assault. But beneath those visible qualities lay the deeper analytical truth. Synchronization was the essence of the campaign. The Mongols were fighting a campaign. Their enemies were fighting disconnected battles. That difference is everything. A battle can be won through valor, chance, or localized superiority. A campaign is won by aligning movements, objectives, logistics, and timing across a whole theater. In AD 1241, Europe discovered the cost of being tactically brave but operationally divided. The immediate shockwaves were immense. With Poland's defenders smashed and Hungary's field army ruined, the road toward Vienna and deeper Central Europe appeared frighteningly open. Panic spread faster than reliable intelligence. This is another enduring law of crisis. When institutions cannot generate accurate information quickly, rumor begins issuing commands. Courts speculated wildly. Populations fled. Leaders lacked visibility. Some imagined the end of Christendom. Others searched for providential explanations because institutional explanations were too humiliating to confront. The psychological effect of the campaign became almost as important as the territorial effect. The humiliation was strategic before it was emotional. The Mongols had neutralized Europe's nearest organized responses in days, not by supernatural force and not by numbers alone, but by demonstrating that speed, intelligence, and command flexibility could erase traditional military prestige. Heroism remained real, but heroism unattached to coordination became ceremonial, a noble performance at the edge of defeat rather than a means of altering the outcome. This is why AD 1241 must be understood not as a simple tale of East against West, but as a revelation of administrative superiority under conditions of extreme violence. Then arises the famous question, one of the great hinges of medieval history. If the Mongols had opened Central Europe so successfully, why did they stop? The death of Great Khan Ogdi in AD 1241 mattered enormously. The Mongol Empire, for all its extraordinary military sophistication, remained governed by dynastic legitimacy. Succession crises could redirect priorities even at the height of expansion. Power did not reside only in armies on campaign. It resided in the imperial structure that authorized, ranked, and stabilized those armies. Therefore, events far to the east could shape the fate of cities in the heart of Europe. But simplistic explanations mislead. The Mongols did not vanish overnight the instant Ogdi died. Their withdrawal unfolded during AD 1242 and likely reflected several interacting pressures. Succession politics demanded attention. Batu's own relations with rival branches of the dynasty were strained. Extended campaigning in Central Europe posed real logistical and environmental complexities. Western terrain was mixed in suitability for steppe warfare, and networks of fortification could impose different costs than those encountered in more open regions. Most importantly, immediate strategic objectives in Hungary and Poland had already been fulfilled to a significant degree. Destruction had been inflicted. Resistance had been broken. The frontier had been clarified by terror. That distinction matters because halted momentum is not the same as decisive repulsion. Europe was not saved solely by battlefield resistance. Europe survived, in part, because Mongol priorities changed. History is often kinder to societies than their own preparations deserve. This is a difficult truth, because civilizations prefer narratives in which survival proves merit. Yet many societies endure not because they were fully ready, but because the enemy's calculations shifted before final exploitation occurred. The consequences, however, were serious and enduring. Hungary, in particular, absorbed the lesson with painful clarity. Stone fortifications gained new importance. Defensive depth mattered more than confidence in a field army alone. Institutional adaptation began, though under the pressure of trauma rather than foresight. Elsewhere in Europe, fragments of the lesson were understood, but not always consistently. Some rulers learned. Some merely thanked providence and resumed familiar rivalries. The Mongols themselves retained the capacity to raid again, demonstrating that the danger had receded strategically, not morally. A threat deferred is not a threat disproven. The deeper lesson extends beyond medieval military history into the anatomy of power itself. Civilizations routinely overvalue visible strength and undervalue coordination, information, and adaptability. Armored elites looked powerful. Monumental titles looked powerful. Sacred legitimacy looked powerful. But the more powerful force in AD 1241 was the one able to learn faster, move faster, decide faster, and align dispersed action toward a coherent end. Institutions matter not because they sound impressive, but because they determine how quickly reality can be processed under stress. This is why the invasion must be stripped of comforting inevitabilities. Europe was not destined to triumph. The Mongols were not destined to conquer all. Both systems faced limits. Dynastic succession constrained one. Political fragmentation constrained the other side. Geography mattered. Fortifications mattered. Time mattered. Historical outcomes emerged not from destiny, but from institutions colliding with circumstance. One side gains momentum, another survives by adaptation, luck, or the redirection of the aggressor's priorities. The result, afterward, is often rewritten as fate. But fate is frequently just misunderstood contingency. The verdict, then, is severe. The week Europe broke was not merely the week Mongol armies won two great battles. It was the week a civilization discovered that civilizational identity without strategic unity is dangerously close to illusion. The cost was counted in ruined armies, shattered regions, frantic courts, and a revelation too stark to ignore. Political fragmentation in the face of a coordinated predator is not diversity of strength. It is organized vulnerability. The modern mirror is uncomfortably clear. Every age produces established systems convinced that scale, prestige, inherited authority, or past success will shield them from fast-moving threats. Again and again, those systems mistake ceremony for capacity. Again and again, they assume an unfamiliar rival must be lesser because it does not resemble the accepted order. Then a crisis arrives, and the real hierarchy is revealed, not by titles, but by who can coordinate reality best. The legacy question remains, and it is not one that statistics alone can answer. When a civilization speaks endlessly of unity but organizes itself around rivalry, delay, and vanity, is the true catastrophe the invasion that exposes its weakness, or the long peace in which it chose not to repair it?